it's incredibly hard to be able to communicate this in simple language for people to understand.
They're no more giving you certifications for perpetuity.
Brown is the new green. That's a perception wise as well. Anything that looks brown eventually is very sustainable. That's how we see about the perception lens as well.
This can be an endless debate between what is aspiration and what is rootedness and what is vernacular and what is green.
If cities could talk, what do you think Bengaluru would say to you?
And we said no. It has to be either material driven or detail driven, and that's the way forward. So
I think the first act of certification is about building in awareness to the common man.
And good or bad for us as a nation today, largely we've been jugaad driven. I have a feeling that if you have to push material or if you have to put product, then it needs to see sense of scale. There is this necessary for speed. I think we should slow down. It's not about a trophy. It's not about some plaque which you put on the wall. It's our ability to continuously recalibrate.
The world would not be the world today if not for the way we use plastic.
It is for us to also reflect back and say what is appropriate tech, not necessarily what is high tech. I think it becomes our responsibility to promote at least one single artisan in your project.
I love Bangalore. The weather is amazing.
Thank you so
and
much.
the people as well.
So good afternoon to each and every one of you seated over here. It's great seeing that this hall is completely packed, and love the enthusiasm that each and every one of you have got by being here. So let's start off. So today's panel discussion would be about unlearning sustainability. Now this is something which is really interesting, and the brief that's been put out by Elev8 2025 is more about trying to understand that sustainability in design is no longer just a trend. It has to become a responsibility, a challenge, and an opportunity to rethink of how we shape our built environment. Now in this session with these esteemed panelists here, we'll try to understand how to unlearn sustainability by exploring evolving landscape in the green design of India and beyond, where we'll be questioning certifications and labels to examining vernacular wisdom, innovative material, and future-ready strategies. Now, through expert insights and rapid-fire reflections, we will now navigate the complexities, possibilities, and ethical imperatives of building a sustainable future. So we'll start with the first segment of this panel, which is known as the Sustainability Reset. And having these esteemed panelists on board over here, I'll now throw out the first question, right? Asking them that many believe that getting a green certification automatically makes a building truly sustainable. Do you think sustainability has been oversimplified into labels and ratings? And what is the real picture behind these metrics? So I'll leave the mic open to. All right, fine, you can.
I think this is an important pause point for all of us to reflect of what happens with the rating system. Of course, it comes with a huge process which is behind it. That is the whole certification process. And that's critical because what we've done thus far, or what we've done earlier, is we didn't put enough weightage to measurements or measurability. So today, I think we are more or less in a mature situation that we are able to measure things out. And that way, in that sense, the certification and the validation of the certification becomes important. Now, with IGBC, we have not limited to one type. Actually, fortunately for us, we have a brilliant team. Now we have 34 to 35 typologies which we can attempt. So that means you've synthesized it back into sets of typologies. So there's a fine curation where it is not same. For if you're doing a house or you're doing an airport or you're doing a smart city, there is actually a huge line of change from one method of certification to the other. But I think the framework was very, very important. It really doesn't matter who comes in and plugs, which architect comes in, which developer comes in, which consultant comes in. So I think that framework was very, very important. So I'll leave that one bit of it, that the establishment of the framework is very, very important. Now, what's also happened, I think that's a pertinent question of what happens once I'm certified, right? There's also a problem. I can be certified, and usually certifications are done as a new product which comes out. But I think the problem lies in continuity. I feel that for us to grow forward is to see continuity in that. And this happens in any kind of architecture which you do, right? You do a project like this, brilliant project, probably one of the most sustainable projects in the city today because you've reused. What would happen with this in 2 to 3 years' time when it is running? I think that's the critical question we need to ask. So I think ratings moving away from being trophies is one bit of it. For us to see how it becomes progressively alive with the building, I think that's important. And now at the IGBC level also, they're no more giving you certifications for perpetuity. So they tell you come back after 3 years and recertify because they're expecting you to allow the building to live and breathe and then check if things are going well, not going well, recalibrate yourself. So for us, I think we are in this mode of good practice where we're continuously recalibrating. So that's my 2-bit. It's not about a trophy. It's not about some plaque which you put on the wall. It's our ability to continuously recalibrate. So I would leave that as a point of takeaway because most often it's misunderstood that once you're certified for life. It is not that.
So how about your take?
Yeah. I think the first act of certification is about building in awareness to the common man that there's something which you can measure and say, yeah, this is a green movement you're moving towards, and you're making life much more sustainable. I think that's the first level at which we do. Another level is also about, we always say vernacular buildings has always been sustainable, but it's not being certified by anything. But I think this also gives us an opportunity to come out and invent new materials which kind of can be brought into the new environment. The new kind of ecosystem where buildings are much more sustainable. So I think certification to a certain level are critical in terms of building in awareness and also to really help in innovation in kind of really looking at creating new materials for construction.
Hi. My personal opinion, so we come from a product background. I'm an architect myself and eventually moved into product design. And then we want to build buildings eventually as a vision, right? So at CarbonCraft, what we do is we do zero cement, zero clay, zero firing technology. So essentially what we do is just that we take waste and we build it. Now is certification as a namesake or it's not? I feel I agree that we need certification as an awareness, as a starting factor. But I also feel from a product lens, what happens to us is we need Griha certification, we need Green Pro certification, we need EPD certification, we need WELL certification. We eventually land up getting 6 types of certifications for 6 types of products. And each of it costs us tens of lakhs sometimes. Lakhs and then also tens of lakhs. So our perspective is very different on that lens where there needs to be something sort of granular looked at the embodied carbon very specifically, which I feel while we're trying to create the larger overarching theme about sustainability and the certification, the core is still, I think, we need to look into that and then build out on that as well. But more journey, more awareness, I think all of that will come in and then build into that as well.
Yeah, I think they have very well briefed on the certification and what are the processes. What I feel is that every material needs to be seen from its core, the core that is used to make the material, to its life cycle, and what happens to it post that. That probably completes the cycle. I think that would be probably a more real way of seeing or weighing the material's viability.
So I think in your case, you're talking about it in terms of how it's going to perform, the longevity of what you create, right? And how does it perform on the long term, right? Yes. You don't look at it from a point of certification, but as Sir had mentioned, you revisit it 3 years from the time that it's been certified and it's been done? And does it continue to perform the same way or not?
Absolutely.
In fact, to ask that question to all of you, in your years of practice and experience, when you've certified your projects, coming back to it or revisiting it, like let's say 3 years or 5 years from the time you all have completed it, have you all seen it behaving the same way? Have you all seen it perform the same way? Is there a consistency, or do you feel that there has been a gap from the time it is certified to how it's performing today?
I think it's a very important conversation point for multiple reasons. And I'll give you what happens with the collective stakeholdership. It comes from, let's say you're doing a developer-driven project, and specifically if I can create an argument between what is residential and what is commercial. Okay, let's take it that way. Let's take a residential view. Let's say today, all of us do residential projects. We get it certified. Some at a unit level, which is a small home. Then what happens is there is a firmer ownership because there's commitment from the owner to keep it alive, keep all the first principles going. Similarly, let's take a developer project who does a commercial project. There is also interest in sustaining this because he is running the OPEX of the building. He is operationalizing the building. He needs to know where the water is going, how much power he is consuming, how he can reduce it. So there is that bit of the conversation. Now, when I take a mass housing project, which is still lies in the domain of residential, there is a transition of ownership. What does this mean? First, there's a developer who builds it. He might maintain your building for 1 or 2 or 3 years. And then it goes into the RWAs, that's the resident welfare associations, who technically need to take this forward because without them, things won't move forward. And then you see cost cutting happening. Somebody will say, we'll switch off the STP for 2 hours because it's consuming more power. Then you know how, and then this is a cyclical thing. And who's maintaining this? It could be tomorrow a watchman who's coming and switching on and off the system. Somebody who's managing a solar will be somebody else. So there is that bit of the problem. So I feel that in the way we operationalize buildings is where the crisis lies. It is not about certification. Certification, I think, is the easiest part of the process. If you need continuity, I think it needs serious O&M processes to be laid. That's when you come back in 3 years, there is failure, right? It's not, and we see failure rates higher in large, high-density residential projects, and we see less failure in office buildings because there is a reason for them to save money and go. So there is a problem now. So it is actually forcing us. I'm sure a lot of you are architects here. And this is an argument which we keep having, is that if you are as passive right as possible, right, that means whatever tech and maintenance components are coming in becomes a connected element later and somebody else is going to take. But if you're passive right and high on passive, I think large parts of your problem are solved. So there is that gap. So I don't know how we can bridge that, but that is the real gap where we stand from certification to operationalization.
I think that's very brilliantly put. And I think with that, I'll ask the next question out here. So today we see a lot of these new age technology materials, right? So high-tech materials and systems, which are often marketed as the future of green design. Now, do you think this is true? And if not, what do you think is the future of green design? Now, I think green can be very subjective. So there is no defined guideline to this. So maybe I think in each one's perspective, it would be really nice to hear how we can kind of address this.
Does anyone want to go?
No, I think you're the right person to start that off. But I'll
right. So so the question, if I got the question right, it's the green.
So we're talking about high-tech materials and systems in today's market, right? Based on whatever
Right.
technology and advertisements and things that come through. So they're marketed as a future of green design, right? So you see that it's all green, it's all about a lot of sustainability being spoken about. But is it actually true when you go down to the
Right.
actual economics of manufacturing it, or even when it's out in the market, does it perform the way it is claimed to be? So do we kind of how do we get an insight into that?
Right. So there are, I'd say there are 3 parts to this. One part is about perception. Second part is about numbers. And third part is how do you really validate it for a common man or anyone else as well. So first part from the perception lens, this is what I understand now. Brown is the new green. This is what I have heard so many times from people and seen it so many times. If it is earthy, it is green in a way. It is low carbon footprint. It is eco-friendly. That's one thing that we are learning as well a lot. Brown is the new green. That's a perception-wise as well. Anything that looks brown eventually is very sustainable. That's how we see about the perception lens as well. But if you really go down to see a brick, it's burnt. It's 1500 degrees, 1200 degrees. It's burnt in a kiln at the end of the day. If you use a fly ash brick and you see the embodied carbon of that would be eventually far lesser than that as well. So one has to compare it. That's what brings us to point two, which is how do you see it from a proper number embodied carbon lens as well. With that, there are tools like LCA, which is what will give you that. LCA is life cycle analysis. Life cycle analysis will then allow us to understand point by point in terms of all the metrics we learn. What does it take to really make this in terms of raw material, in terms of energy, manufacturing, all of that. So it goes from cradle to grave. So cradle essentially is mining, seeing these raw materials, transporting it to the facility, and then you really going through the process, using the energy, and then eventually going to the site. In the end of life, which is what was spoken about as well, like what happens to this end of life? Now, this is number pure that one can do through a specialized sort of a tool and understand all of that as well. But the third part is how do you really communicate this? And that's been one of the major challenges as well. Because we all are laymen at the end of the day, which is what we are trying to explain to people as well. So it's incredibly hard to be able to communicate this in simple language for people to understand. And we are trying our best as well to relate it with, say, this much lesser, that much more energy, or this carbon footprint lower. But one needs to be able to communicate that in a very simplistic language for people to understand as well. So it could be high technology, but I think the core focus should be about numbers and how do you really check these numbers and then be able to do that.
Yeah, I think I have two parts of for that question. One is we do see a lot of greenwashing happening in the name of sustainability, but I think we are at a state today where we need to move beyond sustainability, because I see sustainability as an idea as a pass, as something which has gone. I think Neelam's madam was earlier talking about where we've already crossed the 1.5 degrees. So I think the journey now will be more about like what he is doing in terms of regenerative materials, about what the material can add to the environment rather than saying that I will do less damage to the planet. But I think how is it possible for us to really look at doing something better to the planet rather than doing less harm? I think what he's doing is about really looking at waste as a resource and then working on that, making it much better. And I think that's also the future of new materials, right? If I'm really looking at cellulose as one of the most available material in the planet today, and is it possible for us to really look at cellulose as a building material, as a construction material, and how does that impact the kind of buildings we do? That needs renovation. That needs some new kind of thinking which needs to come in. And I think that's the journey we'll be moving in the very near future, where waste and other new materials will come into play in the way we will build our buildings in the future.
Great.
Yeah. So in our case, yes, like we already discussed, that there's so many new materials coming every day, and it's hard to evaluate, what whether it's really green or not. So our stand is that as long as it's locally sourced and goes through minimal processing, it's a go-to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to add to this question, now when I bring the second segment, which is India at the Crossroads, opportunities and obstacles in sustainable design, I'm going to go back to this question, which I previously asked, and I think, you all gave a lot of insight into. So in terms of, talking about a lot of these materials where we're trying to innovate or where we're trying to see performance index of how they perform in terms of longevity and in terms of how they do with response to climate responsive design, how scalable is this? Because right now we're still seeing a lot of it in terms of, one is scalability, right? Then two is in terms of the higher you scale, it's obviously more possible in terms of optimizing the cost of the product. Because even today, I think almost all of us as architects end up having this, being at this crossroad where you want to promote something which is new, but at the same time you want to promote which is on the lines of, working towards a green sense of design and architecture. But at the same time, you have clients pulling back because they see that the capex that needs to be put in at this point of time is far higher. I mean, it's not even comparable. It's not even like an apple to orange comparison, right? Because the costs are far higher. And that kind of puts us as architects in the back foot because people still want to go back to the convention way. So is there the right way, or is there a way to break out of this convention by creating a balance between two? So you know how convention works, but at the same time, you also bring in that element of balancing out the green initiative or the sustainable possibility. So how do you kind of bridge that gap?
A tough one. I'll just place this in perspective of what happens, let's say at multiple client level. And I think this misnomer of green becoming expensive is not true. I think earlier days it would have been, but today I think there is no cost damage. It might be just cranks up cost by 1% or 1.5%. So, and it's coming down. And good or bad for us as a nation today, largely we've been jugaad driven, and I think from a very positive sense, because I think we have largely seen sustainability inherent in what we do. I'm sure a lot of you, if you're Bangaloreans, you would have heard steel patre saman, one guy coming and screaming out. It starts from there, no? So somebody is actually collecting that material. He's giving you one little vessel in exchange of so the cradle to grave. Anyway, is in that sense happening. But you know where the concern lies is on what do we do as designers? I think that's the question we should ask ourselves. That I think we have to largely play roles of absolute narrators. I think that's what we are missing. Today it is some guy will come and tell you buy these 20 products. Somebody will say yes. I think that level of investigation on materiality also comes from what storyboarding you want to do with that. So it doesn't end with material specification. I think it's important for us as creative people to create a very strong narrative around that. It's like what you're saying. I'm sure if you walk in the city, you know a lot of buildings are done in brick. Now, notionally, yes, people think it is all happy and good. Yeah, but if you take the other end of it, there could be other challenges which are coming in. But you build a story, right? I'm saying, where is this? There is a perception, there is a story which you create. I think that lies in our domain. And also going back to that little thing of what tech, I think it is for us to also reflect back and say what is appropriate tech, not necessarily what is high tech. So I feel that, and also comes from a point of scalability. Everybody has a great idea here. I'm sure you see the number of people who have exhibited, the number of people who have come and put up their stalls here. What is the mandate for scalability? So you can come with anything under the sun, but I think it's important from an entrepreneurial direction to see that this is scalable. I think that's where the problem lies. So I think we should have more shark tanks, more hand-holding, more entrepreneurial holders who can actually pick an idea and say, we'll support you through this in its life cycle. I think that entrepreneurial drive becomes very, very critical for us to move this, not necessarily from a certification and things. You move from an enterprise point of view. It needs a larger enterprise view.
I think enterprise and awareness both together, I think, make a lot of difference at the end of the day.
I just want to add to that. I love the answer because I feel that we all need I don't know about Shark Tanks and how we'll be able to probably put that together. If that is the best. But we are hiring as well, entrepreneur in residence for architects at the end of the day. I feel personally that architects need to go on this journey from start. Design practice is not the only practice that one needs to sort of focus on. There's like a lot of life cycle around it, and one needs to sort of go through that cycle of what does an entrepreneur really need to be able to build a successful business as well. It could be architecture, it could be a product, it could be a part of that business and then become an entrepreneur as well. And to answer that question about scalability, it's more about demand and supply in my mind. So which is, if there's more demand, supply will come in. This is usually like that. How do we balance this once everyone wants a sustainable product, but since the demand, there is demand, but then supply will be always low as someone starting it. For example, right now, as we're looking at Kajaria as tiles, they do about 1 billion square feet a year. Billion square feet. It's madness massive at the end of the day. So you can't compete with the economies of scale and the capacities that they have. So demand has to be driven, and then supply will come with that to be able to reduce costs around it.
Brilliantly put. All right, so I'll move to the next question now. So now this is on the subject of Bangalore being what it is today, and from the time that we've seen Bangalore having grown up in the city to what it has turned out to be today. It's a city that has seen rapid urbanization. When I mean rapid, it's absolutely crazy. I mean the scale at which it's grown today. And IGBC has been pivotal in driving greener practices. While shaping building codes and certifications, which are extremely commendable, how's the chapter tackling enforcement gaps at the high cost of sustainable materials and limited public awareness? But again, this can be very subjective, so I'd like to hear this from all of you.
I know numbers can be quite large. Okay, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we are at what, 13 billion square foot now? 15 billion square foot of buildings certified in India. Okay, wow. And we still feel we are small. And that's exactly coming to what scale means, right? There is this whole largeness or shortness of scale, whichever you may want to look at it. But I'm saying that's why I don't. You can get carried away with numbers. But if I leave numbers out and look at, if I take a Bangalore view to it, today probably amongst all the major cities in India, we are still certifying the highest amount of buildings. Green buildings which are coming out. That's one bit of the story. But is Bangalore green? Is a valid question. I think it's for us to pause and ask ourselves about that. So what's happening is we are extremely focused about what happens in my zone of excellence, right? So if I keep making cities as little enclaves of excellence, right? Does it become a collective? That's the big question we have. So it means that I might have 10 projects in one street, like one tile here, all of them become really platinum rated. But what does it do with the city? So I think the challenging part is that how do I connect all of these together? So that's one bit of it. So it's important that we start negotiating through policy. It's quite exciting at this moment of where we stand as a journey, is at least 9 or 10 cities in India are now pushing green certification in a way that it becomes a policy parameter. Now, what does this mean to, let's say, developer friends or people who are taking up real estate projects? It means that they will get an additional FSI. So I think some cities are working on, if you're platinum rated, they give you 0.25 FSI additional. It's good. Somebody says, wow, I will reach this, then I'll get 0.25 FSI to sell more. That's one bit of it. So it's like the carrot story, right? You put the stick or the carrot, so either which ways you think it will work. The other is that, what is it for me as a last mile stakeholder in this? I am the last mile stakeholder. I bought a little house or an apartment in this. What is it for me? So that comes from, I think, where they're pushing now the boundaries on this is to see whether there are property tax reductions. So if I'm going to buy an asset tomorrow, and I know that, okay, if there is a property tax reduction, that's for perpetuity, right? So if I'm going to pay, might be 50 paisa or 60 paisa lesser, that means that much it's saving me that much. So there is that bit of policy level shift which is possible, and I think it's a good policy shift. Now, again, going back to this islands of excellence and what it does to the city, I think it comes from active citizenry. I feel that how much can you blame government, right? How much can you blame everybody else around you? I'm sure every city, I know a lot of people come from outside, they kind of, brown wash it or green wash it or trash it or whatever they do with Bangalore. But I'm sorry, I'm a Bangalorean. I'll just hold Bangalore fort tougher. Yeah. But it comes from a point that I think it is about very strong accountability for us. Now I'll give you an example of our metro reach today. The plan for the metro reach in the present was to look at, I think it was, must be 10 lakhs or 30 lakhs ridership. 30 lakh ridership is where we are. Today we are sitting at 10 lakh ridership. Okay? Now, where is the gap? The gap is not because metro, of course there are delays in projects and all of that. Are we as citizenry wanting to buy into that, to move that gap from 10 to 30 lakhs ridership? Got it? That is our accountability. I think it lies with us. I know roads are bad and this is bad. That's with every city. It's the same story. There is a pressure of how development happens and infrastructure tries to reach it. And that's the gap which we are trying to fill. It can't happen overnight, but I'm sure there are positive directions towards it. But I think there lies very active responsibility for us from an active citizenry point of view. That is with all of us, right? It is not with government. Government can do only that much. Beyond that, it is limited to what it can do.
I think one more thing. I mean, you were talking about 15 billion square feet of certified spaces, but how much of it is uncertified and still environmentally sensitive?
Yeah. You see, what also happens is this: our entire build industry lies also largely in the it's not completely professionalized. I'm just giving an example of the interior industry. Only around 10 to 12% of the interior industry today is coming from organized sector. That means balance 90% of it still sits in the unorganized domain. See, these are challenges of numbers, right? I know we can stand behind and thrash everybody who comes our way. But I think there is that huge gap which we are trying to fill. It's 90% still lies in the unorganized sector. There will be some carpenter, somebody else who's doing the project and not necessarily coming from where we are sitting today. No? We are fortunately or unfortunately representing the organized side of things. Who's representing the unorganized thing? There is nobody in this entire forum who represents the unorganized sector, right? And that's the problem. Right? We can put collar up and say this is what we're doing. And I think that responsibility lies amongst the unorganized too, because if you have to educate, then the education has to happen from there.
Very, very nicely put. I think that's given a lot of perspective in terms of how we really need to look at the construction industry at every level. So I'll now come to the next question, particularly addressed to you, Chetan sir, considering that you do a lot of vernacular style in terms of your architectural projects, right? And the question here is, vernacular practices are often celebrated as inherently sustainable. I think you've already, raised that question before, but it also mentions that the principles are rooted in specific climates, materials, and lifestyles. Now, in the context of small-scale residential buildings or furniture design, how do we interpret and adapt these principles in today's diverse and urbanized context? Does it still work today? Is it still relevant, or can we look at it differently?
Yeah, I think when we say vernacular, it is not the style of architecture, it's the verb of architecture. It's the kind of spaces we create, the kind of impact vernacular architecture is doing in terms of environmental challenges in terms of, could be passive cooling and things like that, is what we are trying to integrate into our practices. But we are also having a major change in the way we're looking at the life cycle of a built form, right? Earlier we were talking about 100 years or 200 years of a lifestyle, but today we are talking about 30 years or or in the next few years it might be even lesser because the next generation want a different space. So we really need to re-look at the way we even work with materials. And like he was talking about, we need to look at what happens to the building after the building dies. And that's also part of our role as an architect, to really understand, can I reuse this building material further for another few generations? I think that's something we are trying to explore in our works right now, in terms of saying that this material is not only for this building, but for the next couple of other buildings too. So I think that's a journey we are trying to explore and work with. And the next thing is, of course, looking at waste as a building material. I think we have tons of waste. I was talking to another waste management consultant, and they said they're a 700 crore company of waste management materials, but it's a very small entity in that field. That means that it shows how much of waste we have, how much of resources we have. Today, that's a huge resource for us to build as a material. I'm happy that people like him are really looking at that as an industry and coming out with new products.
And how about the furniture industry, upcycling, recycling, reclaiming?
Right. So I'll take off from where he ended. So when you say vernacular and furniture in that, you're saying that the built form is already there. And now how do you look at furniture from that? So the takeaway from vernacular would be optimizing. If you look at interiors and even furniture for that matter, there is always an access. We are consuming. So if, in a way, if we can think of optimizing, using the minimal and reducing the waste. You would have seen the interior sites and the amount of waste that gets generated from each site. That probably will give you a better insight on how to go forward.
I have some things are in the mind, and I hope it just comes from a design attitude. And I'll give you an example. Projects, when they're getting done, toilets, we were discussing that on tiling and all of that. When we unsize a toilet, that means we've generated waste. You understand where I'm coming from? Today, in most projects, I think waste generated out of just doing tiling runs up to as much as 5 to 6%. Whose responsibility is it? It's not the tile layer's responsibility. It is not his responsibility at all. It's not the developer's responsibility. It's not the contractor's responsibility. I think it is our responsibility as architects in that to size it right. That means we should work from the fractal and work backwards and say this is an appropriate size. I feel everything finally boils down to design.
I think I love that thought, but also if you look at it from the lens of what is available in the market and how we build it as well, right? Like, just to give a very quick example, aluminium. We know we use aluminium everywhere right now, and just go to a space which does not have aluminium ever, doesn't exist. 1 ton of aluminium generates about 10 tons of waste. I'll repeat that. 1 ton of aluminium to get, it generates 10 tons of waste. Red mud, that's called. Bauxite waste. You can see that sample over there in our booth as well. But it's the base elements itself. Steel. When steel is generated, it generates insane amount of slag. There was a long period of time where they didn't know what to do and all of that was just dumped. I don't know if you go to even Kishangarh, if anyone's gone to Kishangarh, if you Google Kishangarh right now on your mobiles, it's called the Switzerland of India. That's the amount of waste that it has, acres of land with just water over there. that's the raw material that we are processing and building. I mean, it's just, yes, from the end side of it, but from the other side of that, as Sir was mentioning, we have abundance of this raw material which we can utilize, but it just needs to be engineered to a way that it could be utilized as well.
Yeah, I think it just means a life cycle analysis. I go back to your first point. I think it means serious amount of life cycle analysis. And let's take the aluminum industry for that matter. What's happening in the Middle East today is they're looking at waste heat recovered from their aluminum plant to run their desalination plant. So what happens, they're getting fresh water actually through the waste heat generated out of the plant. So sometimes I feel for us, forget certification. I think now we need cradle to cradle or cradle to grave certification for material, because that will then tell you, yeah, you have to fit yourself in which part of that cycle, right? You're in the apex end or in the tail end of it.
Okay, lovely. So now we'll move to the third segment, which says materials matter, from vernacular wisdom to future innovations, right? And now I'm going to ask a question which I also beg to differ, but I'll anyways ask this question. And the question asks that sustainability often struggles with an elitist tag. We'll come to that. How can innovative materials become mainstream and cost effective so that sustainability is not just for premium projects, but also for affordable housing and public infrastructure?
I think completely wrong, because I think most of my clients are from the middle income group, and all of them would want to have a sustainable home, right? So I don't think it's elitist.
I agree.
I don't think it's elitist. I think there's a great concern to what we're doing to the planet, and
it's a big disconnect, I feel.
Pardon?
It's a big disconnect, right? When
yes,
you say it's
I think, yeah, but of course, certification sometimes is elitist, if I can ask. But I think the whole idea of building something which is environmentally sensitive is not an elitist activity. It's much more a common man's activity right now. With that, I think there is a need for, very frankly, I think I reiterate my earlier statement, there's a need for a lot of new materials to really come up. And I think it's one of the most critical activities which is required today, because most of the materials we're using right now are materials which are consuming a lot of resources, have a lot of inherent energy within them. But is it possible for us to really relook at new materials? Say, there's this company called Blue Planet, which is really looking at how your seashells are generating lime, and really looking at resources from various industries to create lime and in turn create cement. So changing the whole language of concrete from carbon positive to carbon negative and things like that, and redesigning the way concrete is being made. So I think we need new materials like that to really combat the challenge which we are facing right now.
So to add to that, is the concrete industry responsible for this, considering that the volumes are now larger, the production, the terms of, in terms of timelines, in terms of completing projects fast, so it's very rapid in terms of progress. But then when you take a step back and when you look at, tier 2 or even semi-rural context, or even rural context for a matter of fact, because we do a lot of work in the rural, context, and we still see the experimentation, rather working with lime is still something which is relevant today, right? But whereas you also see that there is a rapid sort of a transition where they're also beginning to move to cement only because you get to build faster. And there is this perception saying that concrete buildings are stronger, but in reality, the life cycle or the life tag is actually far lesser compared to even a concrete block versus a simple brick, right? And you know the difference. So this is again sort of bringing in a huge perception, thinking that concretization and steel is more in terms of modernity and progress, but in reality, it actually paints a very different picture. So how do you really take a view on that?
I think the first thing is about how do we manufacture that? I mean, is there a different way of doing what concrete does? And I'm sure there's an answer for it. I'm sure there's an answer for it. And look, the world would not be the world today if not for the way we use plastic, right? Plastic has been both a boon and a bane for the civilization. But we need to really look at how is it being manufactured. Today, we are talking about biosensitive plastics or eco-sensitive plastics versus petroleum plastics and things like that. So we need to change the way we manufacture those materials. And I think it's possible. It's possible.
Good.
Sir, no, please.
No, it's, I don't know, I think it's, for me, it's completely misplaced, this conversation, for two things. First, who are we building for? And that's, at the other end, there is another aspirational person who wants that to be built for, right? It is, I go to a rural area, that guy is seeing there is technology penetration, there is information penetration which is happening. He or she or that family is seeing things which are around them, which are changing rapidly. And how many of them actually engage architects? That's the other, you have to look at it from that side too, that actually who's designing for them, right? Eventually it will be a non-architect. Like you say, they're all barefoot, basically, barefoot architects as a company, not them, but there are actually just they're getting it done. And that's the big part of what gets built today. That's an aspirational bit. So it goes back to how much of the aspiration bit can I curtail? Is it an architect's responsibility or a designer's responsibility to cut down that person's aspiration? But I think design mediates again. Design needs to have that overarching conversation around that. It also comes from material and scale, right? Eventually, I have a feeling that if you have to push material or if you have to put product, then it needs to see sense of scale. So where does that achieve? Where does this come from? Classic case like what you're mentioning, Kajaria's. I think they built tons. It comes from somewhere. The tilting part is when scale needs to be there. Then otherwise, it becomes one bit of the story. The other bit of the story is karigari, right? That is craftsmanship. How many of them continue to do what today we say is reasonably good vernacular, is good karigari, right? There's good craftsmanship. Craft is dying, right? Everybody wants to come and do other things, right? So what is the sustenance for craft? If we don't answer that question, this can be an endless debate between what is aspiration and what is rootedness and what is vernacular and what is green. I feel we're killing the craft. Today I think it's important for us from, let's say, to get red oxide flooring done. I'm sure you operate very strongly in that region. Apple brand, one brand will come and say, now I have replaced red oxide. So somebody is capitalizing that market because what's happening is there is a skill loss, right? That means you're expecting anybody to come and apply Apple brand and then tomorrow that becomes red oxide. But is that the truth? So for us, I think collectively, I think it's an obligation for us as key crafts, as designers, to at least encourage one art in your project, right? It doesn't matter which artisan you're promoting. I think it becomes our responsibility to promote at least one single artisan in your project because I think that's the way it will go forward. Otherwise, that chain will get broken.
So just to, to add to what you've said, in all your projects and the projects that you all have been working on, and when you talk about, trying to uplift or to promote that level of, the importance of Karigar in your projects, to keep it sustainable or to keep it going and not lose that touch, maintain that sense of consistency across the various board of projects and various skills that you all practice. How do you kind of bridge that, or how do you, see that that doesn't get replaced? Or even if you were to replace it, what else could you replace it with so that you don't lose that, you don't lose that sense of craftsmanship in your projects?
So, like you rightly said, that even good karigars for woodworking are, with every generation, it's getting lesser and lesser. And if you want to keep that going, there will be an effort or a conscious effort from our side to say there will be a cost that comes with it, you know, and it's something you have to accept. It's the balance that you have to maintain, to say that you want something, you want that quality, you want that workmanship, then it comes with a certain cost.
I totally agreed, yeah.
No, that's becoming elitist. No? You understand the logic, right? If I have to pay a premium for a good karigar, that means I've already pushed that level price tag to make it elite. So, and that's the problem. I think that's seriously, I don't know what we can do. I'm just posing this because you're all young entrepreneurs here who will want to take this conversation at your level.
No, I want to just put in a point here. Is, do we look at craft from the perspective of conservation of a particular craft? Or do we look at craft because the tools of that craft have changed, right? So are we looking at enhancing that craft from the tools and trying to create a new language out of that craft? What is it that, I mean, you're talking about holding on to certain crafts. But I would always say that craft is an evolving thing. So even the way my mason works, he would change the way he'll work because of the new tools he has, right? But if I have to really look at conservation, I'm saying if I'm doing oxide floors using conservation techniques, then I'm talking about the river stone and starting work at late nights to polish it throughout the night. So I think there are two things. So conservation sometimes is elitist, but I think change of the language of craft is something which we can all bring in.
I think it just makes that you have to be relevant in that time. If you're not relevant in that time, so be it. Then nothing moves. So I think it just makes each one of us, I think at least craft side of it, to be relevant, right? Doesn't matter what we are doing. Now tomorrow that guy, Jali guy, will go and do a CNC cut thing because today you have a laser cut. Now what does he become? I'm sure he becomes still the craftsman because he's still designing it. But might be he uses CNC to make it far more efficient. So I think there is an efficiency dimension to it. So the progression is to become relevant in every time cycle as it moves forward.
So I'll just add something that in the same context. We have these karigars who do the carving work. So we use them to get the wood texturing done. Now the same wood texturing can also happen with CNC. It's cheaper, faster. But then it doesn't have the same quality that a hand-done texturing work has. So there it also becomes, the onus is on the designer to make the audience aware of the difference and try and continue that. Otherwise, of course, it'll die because that will be cheaper.
Fair enough. And talking in terms of the context of wood, today we see a huge market for engineered wood, right? Now, it's marketed as a green alternative to traditional timber. Now, I mean, I'm not into wood, so I don't know too much about it. But to what extent do these certifications on engineered wood and sourcing practices truly ensure that it actually has an ecological credibility to it? So, is it replacement for actual wood, or is it reducing the dependence on traditional timber? So, how could we kind of understand that further?
So I think I'll again go back to what we discussed earlier, that any material, starting from the raw material used, so a lot of these timber boards are made using a lot of resins. And then what is the life cycle it has, and then what happens to it post that? If it's seen in that context, then a material can be used for its green or recyclable purpose. Otherwise, wood naturally has a cycle. It has a beginning and it has an end, and it's not going to in any way add any kind of burden. So that's how we need to
but
wait.
Talking about the process of engineered wood, I think engineered wood also goes through a lot of processes. It goes through manufacturing, and there is a lot of energy that goes into its production.
Absolutely.
So then is that sustainable, or is that an alternative?
Look, I think if I'm really looking at engineered wood right now, it's a byproduct of a waste material. Right? At the same time, the kind of systems which goes into manufacturing it, the inherent, the energy which it consumes, the kind of resins it consumes, does not make it environmental sensitive. But the very fact that it's something which is a byproduct of a waste material is something which we can think of.
It's a start, right?
It's a start,
Yeah.
right? And I think it needs process. It needs progress.
Right.
My, I think I'd just go back to LCA. For me, everything is a number at the end of the day. If you go back to the life cycle analysis and then ask for the embodied carbon end to end, cradle to grave, that should just probably be able to sort of tell us whether it is this or that. Because we need to be able to understand from the right numbers that you get at the end. And what I think the challenge that's happening also is we're not used to asking the life cycle analysis or the embodied carbon. We're not used to asking, because I think first is for us to educate ourselves with these. What does it really take to make these? What is the embodied carbon of each of these building materials? And then be able to ask that to people as well, because that's when we'll know. Otherwise, it's impossible in a tsunami of materials that we have. How do you really know what is good, what is bad, what is less, what is more?
So does that onus also lie on the manufacturer or that company which is responsible for that material to, say what its life cycle is? Wouldn't it be pertinent for us to know what goes behind the scenes? And I mean, I know it wouldn't be feasible for them to, reveal the tricks of their trade, but don't you think it comes from that point of an ethical context?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, business is for making money. That's what people want to do. Otherwise, people wouldn't be selling cement.
Yeah, that's true.
We are consuming cement is the second largest material consumed on earth only after water.
Wow.
So really, I mean, it's not the onus of the manufacturer. They'll not give it. Why should they give? They won't.
I think I've opened a large can of worms over here. I think.
No, I think it goes back to, let's say, especially when you say take timber, I would say there is an ethic dimension to it. I think it's your right to ask, where is the source of this timber? And most good certified timber will tell you source. So if it's a non-forest timber, then you can rightfully ask, can you give me NFT, non-forest timber certification? So these are now interesting legal processes which are getting embedded. So in that sense, you have the right to ask. So then you can look at, say, some are plantation, it is cultivated for that specific purpose, right? And so I think there are, I won't say it is absolutely clean, but I think there are good processes in place.
Yeah. Just one thing I would like to add. So what we are doing now is to use recycled wood, reclaimed. So there is still so much of wood in the market which is brought down from houses, and it's actually really good wood, and it has still a fair amount of life left. So probably reusing that is a good alternative.
True, and it makes a lot of sense. So I think with that, we'll move to the next segment, which is rethinking sustainability across time and borders, right? And this question now, when you were talking about India, so when you look at India's urban growth, building practices and sustainable policies with global counterparts, at what point in time do you think we are ahead of the curve, but at the same time, where do you think we are lagging behind?
From a sustainability point of view, where are we, right, in terms of scale? I think it again comes back to the point of who are we looking at? I mean, is it the individual? Is it the architect? Is it the developer? Is it the government? Where are we in all of these? So if I have to say from a lens of government in terms of policy, which is policy, then where are we in terms of sustainability in the time scale? Are we this side? Are we that side? I personally feel that we are, like, if you go down to Copenhagen, in a way, they've measured and they've told that there is a per square meter emission. Over and above this, if you use building materials, you have to pay a tax. There's a carbon tax on that as well. Are we there on the policy side? No, we're not. So, barring that, if we go down to the lens of individuals, I think a lot of us need to ask. First is architects need to ask the manufacturers, for that matter, what is your embodied carbon? Where are we with that? I mean, that's the starting point I feel from for the product lens. If we start asking as architects itself, we start asking the product owners about their emissions, and as you mentioned, where is it really coming from? What is the source? I mean, that's the start of things. Even if we start at that, even if they don't have, can we just get some information and then begin from that? So I still feel there's a long way to go, but we're still going ahead with a lot of these certifications being put together, awareness being coming in place as well.
I think even on the positive side, there are a lot of architects, designers, and even product-based professionals across India. Though, in terms of scale, you're doing it only for a sizable volume because, scaling up takes a long time. But I still think it's very commendable at multiple levels at which this is happening. So I think from that point of view, at least, there does seem to be a lot of awareness in the Indian context. I think India seems to be a very good, great open market for design, right? And also talking about it in that context, do Indian buildings in general, like let's say comparing them with the context in countries like Europe or even in the US, where for majority of the time of the year it's extremely cold, so you're dependent a lot in terms of usage of artificial means of energy for heating, cooling, etc. And a country like India or somewhere in the South American context where it's very tropical, you still seem to be able to exploit the possibility of getting in a lot more natural air and ventilation, right, as a part of your design. So do you think in that context we seem to still have an edge over countries like those, or is it very different in that sense? Because we're looking at it in multiple scales, right? We're looking at it from a developer point of view, from government policies, or from an individual scale. So how do we kind of address that?
Yeah, I think when I remember when LEED was first introduced, I think we had a session at Mistri's where it was being presented. You were also there. I think the first question was that when LEED was first introduced, it was said that mandatory was that all buildings should be air cooled. Right? So I think that has changed today. Fortunately, I think. Sorry, I kind of lost the question.
No, I was just talking about it from a tropical country point of context to countries where it's relatively more colder. So for them, it's more about keeping their architecture inwards, right? They have to seal up a lot of things. Right. Versus for us, we get that freedom to open out, right? So in that sense, do we have an edge? Do we have an edge over our counterparts?
Definitely. I think that's true. We can cool our building passively. Need not go in for active cooling and lighting. Of course, we have an edge on that. I think that's the answer.
For me, I think there is. We need to tweak it a bit. In the sense, I feel that it has to be region-centric. I think it has to be regionally driven. Even within India, we have five zones. We can't use the same method across the 5 zones. We are blessed with all the 5 zones, so we deal with all of them simultaneously. So I feel that you can't have a single sweep. So I think mandates will be different. It has to be as localized as possible. I feel that there lies the opportunity.
So going local is more sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think going local is as sustainable as possible. And I feel that from an India point of view, I don't think so we lack knowledge. I think we have upper story is very, very good. I think very strong upper stories. But I think it comes from opportunities for application. And I think a lot of the West is learning from us in more than one ways. Why we get into this trap is there is this necessary for speed. I think we should slow down. No, as generally as people, I think it's important that we slow. Smell your coffee. Smell your coffee. And I think things will become better, because once, and that's the thing, right? If you look at rapid engineering, you will put slabs, and every 7 to 10 days one slab is up. By the time you've reached from the bottom, you started curtain glazing, and by the time you snapped your finger, building is up and about and ready. True. I think I have these two concerns from my end.
Right. Your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, we can slow. My only worry in that case is 70% of the construction required for the built environment by 2030 is not even started as yet. So I'm sure India is going at a cusp of sort of it's the highest GDP growth that we are going in. So there is going to be a lot of built environment infrastructure being built. So I personally feel that we need to sort of ramp up innovation and push accountability so that we are all sort of taking up responsibility. And that starts from ground up, from individual homeowners to, say, consumers, to then all the stakeholders involving architects, to then developers, to then everyone. I mean, policy will do its job when it will do its job, but we need to probably ramp up that.
Any thoughts from you, Nehal, for the last bit of it?
I think another important thing is to generate awareness, because I think that is where we fall back. If there is awareness, then it will go hand in hand. Just us being aware may not be enough, but general awareness of the people so that you walk alongside is also as important.
So, I mean, to all my fellow panelists, I really thank you all for giving this beautiful insight into this lovely conversation that we've had. But we are not done yet. We still have something called as a rapid fire round. So I'm going to ask each and every one seated over here a bunch of questions to which you can, feel free to answer whatever your heart desires. So the first one would be to Dr. Anup Naik, right? Okay, great. So would you rather honor the past through preservation or redefine the future with bold innovation?
I'll be balanced. I think it's the time to take innovation at reckless speed, right, and to feel absolutely rooted and not losing empathy.
Lovely. So, no, you're not done yet. I still have a few more questions for you. Yeah. So the second one is coffee-fueled brainstorming or nature-walked inspirations.
Coffee to be awake and nature walk to live.
Wow, that is beautiful. All right, next one. If cities could talk, what do you think Bengaluru would say to you?
She will say, I'm in pain. And she'll say, if you keep going on like this, I will part ways.
Ouch. I totally hear you on that. And the last one would be, is urban density a challenge or do you see it as an opportunity?
Yeah, it's a tough one, but I think urban density is the future. I think we have to look at redensifying as quickly as possible, and we need solutions to meet that redefinition of density, and we can't shy away from that. So we need to take the bull by the horn.
Thank you so much. The next one to Tejas. Your favorite upcycled material?
Oh, Diwar. That's CarbonCraft.
Lovely.
That was easy.
Yeah, sure. If you could transform any city's streets into art installation, right? Which city would you choose?
Bangalore.
Lovely. Thank you.
I love Bangalore. The weather is amazing.
Thank you so
and
much.
the people as well.
All right. If you were to make a documentary on CarbonCraft, what would you name it?
An architect's life.
Wow. Okay. And the future of construction materials in just one word.
Empathy. I don't know. That's, I think, what I would choose. Future of construction materials. Yeah. Empathy. I don't know. I mean, that's, in that one word, encompasses why we should build, how we should build, and what we should build for. And everything, the circle revolves around empathy for us.
I think you're already on that track, so I think it's great that you follow that path, right? And next to Chetan, sir. Who or what is your biggest muse?
My wife is sitting in the auditorium. My wife.
Great.
Let me be safe.
Okay, rural innovation or urban adaptation?
Rural innovations.
Wow, lovely. One craft you adore?
I think of late, I see every mason or every labor in my team as a craftsman, and every brick they lay is a new craft for me.
Beautiful. This one is a tough one, but which emerging Indian practice, design practice, would you like to collaborate with?
PMA.
Oh, okay. That was quick. Thank you. And the last one to Nehal. So, one design element you overuse.
I'll not say design element,
Okay.
but how wood and metal come together.
Okay. Right. Pop of color or neutral palettes?
Neutral palettes any day.
Lovely. Which misstep in design gave you the most transformative insight?
At times, we started off a design exercise with form. And I think that's where we went in circles and we realized, because there was nothing to anchor, there's nothing to fall back on. And we said, no, it has to be either material driven or detail driven. And that's the way forward. So,
Lovely. And
I like the word that you're trying to work with form and you're going around in circles.
And the last one for this panel discussion. If you were to design a train where every seat tells a story, what's your first move? Wow, okay.
maybe documenting all the seating elements that you can find.
Okay, nice. All right, so I think with that, we'd like to conclude this panel discussion. Thank you so much to all the fellow panelists. I think it was a brilliant insight and a brilliant learning experience for all of us. And thank you, Elev8, for this opportunity.
So we have a few questions for you. So which would you prioritize for an immersive experience? An interactive flow or a dynamic ceiling?
A mix of both? I think it would be a mix of both. I really can't pick. It's very difficult to do that.
So there's a building that you'd love to live inside for a week. Which one would that be?
Probably I am Bangalore.
Oh, okay. Nice. Bamboo floors or recycled concrete walls?
Let's do bamboo floors.
Bamboo floors? Just with the previous session, yeah, I think we've heard a lot about that. According to you, which tactile element makes a space unforgettable?
I don't know, it's completely dependent on the material that's being used. So, I mean, like if I were to look at this space, I think every single material has its own story and its own tactility. So, I think I'm being very diplomatic with this, but I think this is what defines the entire experience of being in a building, right?
Would you say it depends on the user as well, their perception?
I mean, user perception is again very subjective. So, I mean, I think everyone has their own sense of perception. So, I think what is perception in terms of mind would be looking at an overall, like an overall look and feel of the space, right? So, yeah, I think I would probably go with that.
Okay, thank you, sir. That was
Thank you so much.
interesting. Thank you to all our panelists for that inspiring discussion. We've learned that we must now move beyond sustainability and think of how we can better the planet, not just work on less damage. We also now know that brown does not necessarily mean green. We now open the floor for questions from the audience. If you have one, please feel free to raise your hand.
So my question is to Aditya and Anup sir, because both of you come from different ranges of a spectrum as an old and a young professional. So my no offense, but so to Aditya I would ask, being in young practice, how do you convince your clients to, adapt sustainable practices when they have come with a preconceived notion of their expectation? Or how do you convince, when there is a lot of competition around, we know that architecture being a very competitive field, how do you convince your clients to not move from you and to adapt sustainable practices? While I would like to mention that to Anup sir also, while working with big developers like in apartment projects or large-scale development, large-scale residential developments, how do you implement that sustainability? Like, do you think apartments in Bangalore are moving towards sustainability or just being generalized still?
We were all young once.
Sorry, sir.
Okay. Okay. Leaving that aside. No, I think it's, so we've worked with reasonably, across our footprint in the last 25, 26 years of working, we worked with developers continuously. And I feel that every passing year, we've seen that attitude completely change. One of our first work was to work with a company called Biodiversity Conservation India Limited, BCIL. We did their first project called TZ Homes. Not to pat myself on the energy, right from designing air conditioning system, which is a district cooling, to as much as to look at the refrigerator in that place. So what happens when you have to recover heat from that refrigerator? So some projects are very intense in that cycle. Have I done another project like that thus far? No. Okay, so I think it comes from what the patron of the project is trying to push at you. So we react to that. Today, I believe that a lot of the developers are reasonably SDG aligned, so Sustainable Development Goals alignments are there. That also helps them to place their cause in a specific direction. There's the other part of it, because once you're more than 2 lakh square feet of built-up area, you're normally towing the line of the Ministry of Environment and Forest. So the MOEF guidelines, even before you start thinking of sustainability and green, are also working along with you on that. So I feel that you can't get out of it, right? Eventually, whatever you do, you will not be able to get out of that cycle. Some of them use that as a marketing spiel. Some are quite okay not to put this up as marketing, but thus far, touchwood, I think we've been blessed enough to be working with clients or developers across the spectrum who are willing to take that one step forward. So I feel that we are in a better space now than probably even 15, 16 years ago.
So to answer your question, you're talking about how it, it takes a lot of convincing for a younger practice. Well, we're not that young anymore. We're almost about 8 years in the industry. But it's also taken us 8 years to get to where we are, and we're still not there yet, right? I mean, there's still a long way to go. But I think in terms of convincing a client, initially, yes, the challenge was there because, people would just kind of, throw that question at you saying, why this, why that? And I think it's also about how you build your narrative around it. So I think iterative design in terms of your process, how do you run the client through your process is very important, because I always see that the end result is one thing, that's fine. But what goes behind it? So when you're able to explain to your client, the process behind it, if there is craftsmanship involved, or if there is, if there is a way to show them the entire way of how things are done, I think you can try and align yourself with the client. Initially, it is hard, but I think a lot of times, we've gone with the flow. we're still doing that, right? And we still find ourselves stuck in, certain crossroads. But then whenever we are in that kind of a situation, we look at their practices, right? I mean, they've been doing this for years together, and I think they've, built their practices with a very strong motive. It takes a long time. So being in this field of architecture is a long-term marathon. It's not something that brings results overnight. And for us, it took us almost about 7 years to get our first break, which was beyond the residential segment, to jump into an institutional sector that could give us this kind of opportunity. But I think many a times you should just kind of let it be, right? I mean, if you can build your narrative and convince your client across the years together, I think that's probably the way you can go about it.
Just to add to a continuation of what you said, organizational rootedness of first principles are very, very important. It really doesn't matter after that of where you're compliant. If your organization is rooted to first principles of sustainability, it will be that way, right? And then you guard yourself around that. You put all your guardrails around it. You can say different stories, but inherently you'll have two stories. One, there will be a very strong internal story, which is driven by your own guardrails, and then there'll be an external story which will get externalized. All your, whatever comes by the way, you'll see it in the ads and stuff like that. But I feel that as younger practices and with whatever you're ending up doing, don't let your first principle down. I think then everything is good to go.